Tony Brown walks in the indoor. He's with us on the 3s and 4s field. And this ain't a regular Tony Brown. This is a pissed off Tony Brown.
Hey, welcome to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com, and we've got something really special today. You've seen this guy all over social media these days. You probably already follow him at Mac_Hereford. He's living the good life. He's made a lot of incredible memories in Tuscaloosa and in college football. Former Alabama wide receiver Mac Hereford is with us today. Mac, thanks so much for doing this, man. So cool of you.
Ben, I appreciate it. Great intro to me. It's not that crazy, but I appreciate it. I'm loving what I'm doing and super grateful for where I'm at and excited to be here talking to you guys. So
don't sell yourself short, man. Seriously, you're up to some crazy stuff, and we're going to hear all about that. And we also want to know how you ended up in Tuscaloosa, what it was like being part of that team during the best run in college football history. But we have some news early this week. I mean, Alabama has hired Ryan Grubb as the new offensive coordinator. This is Kalen DeBoer's guy, right? I mean, they coached together at Washington. They went to a national title game together. They developed Michael Penix Jr., who went on to be a first-round pick and played in the NFL at the end of the season. And Grub was hired at Alabama before taking the OC job with the Seattle Seahawks this past season. He spent a season there before he was fired, and now Kalen DeBoer has his man. And, you know, this is unique because Alabama's 2024 offensive coordinator, Nick Saban, reportedly still going to stay on staff this season, at least as of now. As we're talking, our friends Nick Kelly and Matt Stahl at AL.com have all the coverage, so you can check it out. But for some players on this roster, Matt, Grubb is their fourth OC in as many seasons. And you've got some experience with this, right? I mean, your OCs at Alabama were Lane Kiffin and Brian Daboll, Mike Locksley, Steve Sarkisian, so you can speak to that. But, Matt, first off, I mean, since this is so fresh, I want to ask, what do you think of the Ryan Grubb hire at Alabama?
Look, I would love to give a lot of insight and analysts on it, but I obviously saw the move. I'm excited about the move just because I think the coaching staff hires have been great in this offseason. And also knowing he's been with certain guys that, you know, he developed Penix, like that's awesome for the Alabama quarterbacks. And to bring in a guy that DeBoer is really excited about, has worked with previously, I think is like now we're getting to see him build out the program that he really had built at Washington and bring it into Alabama. So I'm excited for it. I don't know too much about it. I haven't been following it as much as I should, but really excited for it. That's all I'll say. I'm excited to see what's going to happen, and I think he'll do a great job.
Well, what about changing offensive coordinators from the point of view of a player? Like, I mean, how does that impact the team, the mission, the vision? I mean, you spend so much time learning a system, and then overnight, here comes a new install your way, right? I mean, how difficult is that for players? And, you know, how does it affect execution and team chemistry? Or Mac, I mean, is it possible that there are so many similarities to what they already know because it's DeBoer's system?
Yeah, so that's something I have had experience, like you said. So I went through 4 offensive coordinators myself. Like you said, I went through Kiffin, Daboll, Locksley, and then Sarkisian my final year. And then even at the wide receiver position, went through 4 coaching changes as well. I would say, so I'll start off personally. Personally, you know, when I first got there, it's like, all right, I'm trying to understand and learn this whole entire new playbook. You know, you go from high school to now college, which is at a newer level, which is at Alabama specifically, it's not like any other college in the country. I think I would like to say we have like an NFL-like playbook that's developed out and has just tons and tons of different plays. So I get in, I'm trying to learn and understand what's going on under, you know, Kiffin first, and then and he has a certain system, and then bang, we switch to someone else. Now, sometimes we would keep, so the biggest thing is for guys, a lot of times the way we get the play call is through signaling. And so that changes. And signals, it's hard to understand. So if we have, you know, it could be on a board. They hold up a board. People wonder why they hold up boards at games. The boards have different objects, shapes, things on them to help us know what formation, what we should line up in. Those things occasionally change from coordinator to coordinator. Now, if the coordinators have a specific way, so Mike Locksley, for example, loved RPOs, so run pass option, whereas we didn't do as many of those with Kiffin. And so we had more of those added into the playbook, and then we kept some of the base Alabama plays that we had been used to. And so I'd say it wasn't a complete 360 most of the time. It wasn't like we had to relearn a whole entire new system. A lot of times a guy would come in, kind of know or hear what we've learned or understood from guys who've been there. The quarterbacks did a great job of that because a lot of times they were the ones making the signals, or they would have like an offensive GA helping out with the signals. And so we try to keep sync there. But and that's just from the base of playbook. So again, the playbook's going to change. I wouldn't say a complete 360 most of the time. Now, sometimes it would drastically change in the sense of, like I was mentioning, a Mike Loxley who loves RPOs to a different coach. That was one thing, the plays. It was definitely a challenge. And guys knew that we were going to have to come in, and we knew we were going to have to learn and adapt. That's just the way Alabama was. So I wouldn't say there was like a feeling of, dang, we have to learn new plays or this is this. It was a job. And guys knew coming in that whether that changes or not, we're going to have to be prepared. Because even if we did have the same offensive coordinator, which we never did, I assume that they would have changed up the playbook and would have even made adjustments themselves that we had to learn. So it was hard, that part of it. The other part I would say, which is another bigger part, and specifically at the wide receiver position with position coaches, you come in, and a lot of these guys, I wasn't highly recruited or anything, but a lot of these guys highly recruited. You're listening to this coach. He's telling you, hey, so-and-so, you're coming to the University of Alabama. I'm going to work with you. I'm going to develop you, and I believe in you, because that coach may have offered them a scholarship, like an investment. And then so when that coach leaves, I know that for me, I was going to show up, do my job, everything like that, regardless. But when it comes to other players who were really recruited by some of these guys, it's a tough position, because you've now developed a relationship. You've been told this coach is going to help develop you, find a way to put you in the offense. And then they go, and you're thinking, all right, well, now what's the plan with me? Does this new offensive coordinator care about what the original plan was with me at that position? And that can be a challenge. And I know for some guys, it could be really tough because they got really close to the offensive coordinator. And so that was difficult. And then on the last end, I would say, a lot of people bring up the question, should players, is it bad that coaches change all the time? Players really come in, but the same thing happens for players. Coaches recruit players, and players can now, especially with the new transfer rules, just up and go wherever. So my understanding and my thoughts around it were just, look, if an offensive coordinator is going to leave, he's doing what's best for him and his family. And I can't be upset about that. Partially I may be a little bit upset because that offensive coordinator had a different plan or believed in me more than this new guy did. But at the same time, players and coaches are all trying to do what's best for themselves. So I know I kind of gave you a lot of words there, but at the end all be all, it's definitely a change. It's something that you have to adapt and definitely, try to understand and know going into it that, hey, it's going to be a big change. And it can be from many different attacks, whether it's you have to learn a new playbook, whether it's, hey, here's a new guy who doesn't necessarily know me. I have to rebuild a new relationship with this coach. So those are challenging things for sure, but nothing that holds back a team, especially, I can only speak on the years that I was there, but under Coach Saban, it was no matter what the circumstances are, we're going to show up and be the best we are going to be every day. And so I hope they're going to do that this year as well. With the new coaching changes they've made in this offseason.
Super fascinating stuff there. I mean, you mentioned the boards, and like you'll see on the sideline, they're holding up this board and it's got like, Super Mario and a poop emoji and like the Philadelphia Eagles logo. And it's just like, all right, well, I guess they know what's going on here. Like it's all about code, but like you just have to hope the play works. I won't ask you to do this unless you really want to. I wanted to ask, like, rank your offensive coordinators while you're at Alabama, Mac. But like, who had like the strongest impression on you? Like when you were at Alabama, I mentioned all four of those guys, highly accomplished OCs, national title winners in most of the cases. But like, which of those OCs do you think like left the strongest impression on you? Whether it was right when you met them or when you left Alabama or when they left Alabama.
Yeah, so I would say, and I'm bad at these kind of answers, the ranking stuff and everything like that.
I'm just kidding.
Too nice sometimes, but I'll talk about each of them briefly. So coming in my freshman year, Coach Kiffin, I didn't really have a strong relationship with Coach Kiffin. I didn't know him too well. Some of the stuff he did was goofy and kind of bizarre a little bit. But what I took away from him is mastermind, offensive mastermind. The way that he had all these plays. And we always studied all these plays. In my mind as a freshman, I'm trying to think, how am I supposed to learn all of this stuff? And why am I learning 1,000 plays and we're only running, 20 in a game? Well, it's because the fascinating thing about him that was always fun to see is it was like Coach Kiffin, and we've seen it when he's played Alabama. We see new things. And that was the cool thing about him is it was he had this really strategic playbook, a very broad playbook, and he was willing to use this for this moment, this for this moment, and able to make these changes. And so that was the one thing from him was like, look, this guy is an offensive mastermind. He's a genius. A little bit bizarre at times, funny. Obviously, we see him troll now. Moving on to Dayball, who I really liked just because is a white guy receiver. I remember Mac Jones telling me one time Tua had thrown a ball to me, and I think the DB messed up his coverage. I was wide open. Wasn't anything crazy on my part. I was just running a straight line, caught the pass, and took it house in practice. And Dayball made some kind of reference to me being similar to the Patriots wide receivers. And it was funny because he coached the Patriots. But his attention to detail as well, and just his sternness, I would say is something I remember from his time there. And then moving on to Loxley. Loxley was really close with the players, really built a great relationship with him. And I knew, at Alabama, he had lost his son and went through a lot of adversity. So it was not, obviously you don't wish anything like that to ever happen to someone, but the way he responded to it and the way he would be able to talk to whether I had issues with X, Y, or Z, and, talking about his own life and opening up and being very personable. And then leading on to, and his run pass option offense, it was something that was a little bit hard for me to understand at first, but when I got the grasp of it, it was really cool because Loxley loves a quarterback that's able to move, that's able to run, make smart decisions. He relies a lot heavily on that. And I'm happy for all three of those first coaches having good positions that they're in now. Moving on finally to Sarkisian, I really liked Sark personally because as an offensive coordinator, the way I tell people at Alabama is you have Coach Saban, you have the OCs, you have the position coaches. The position coaches develop the real relationships most of the time with the players. So we, rarely would you have a great, there's some guys who would have great relationships with the OC, but then it's Saban up here. You rarely talk to Saban, and it goes down the line. It's like a business model structure is what I like to say. But with Sarkisian, the thing that was cool is he would joke with us. And, for me personally, he was always able to say, hey, that guy's working hard. Or, when a different player, his ability to see guys who weren't necessarily the stars, but really had a place for me because I'm a guy who's not playing out there on Saturdays, yet this guy is going to point out that, hey, Hereford, that's a great route right there. Love to see that. He's going to sit there and watch third string, fourth string, second string film and make those guys feel appreciated and loved, and also be able to utilize those clips to teach the guys who are starting. So I'd say I really love that about Coach Sarkisian. So all those offensive coordinators, really awesome. Like I said, I look back at it and I'm like, holy hell, like I can't believe I'm extremely blessed when I got to play at my dream school, but with some of the four best, like that's a positive way of looking at it instead of, dang, I had to change offensive coordinators all the time. Well, I got to experience and have the best pieces from four incredible coaches who are doing a great job now. So loved each and every single one of them, as well as my position coaches too.
It's incredible insight there, Mac. And I want to ask you a little bit about, you mentioned the dream school aspect of your career, but I want to go back to one thing that you said about Dayball and just talk about this generally. You used the phrase white guy, wide receiver, right? Like, is that a thing on a football team where is that a dynamic? Like, is that something people joke about? Like, is that something that Dayball just gave you grief over? What exactly do you mean by that?
I think it's a thing, that over time, look, in a position group, in the wide receiver position group, there are less white guys. It's a fact. If you look at the numbers of white guys starting at the wide receiver position, there's less of them. And so it's just funny. It's kind of a thing. Like I take pride in it. It's like you're very few. You're the minority in this situation, and it's kind of fun to have that like aura of being a white guy wide receiver. Like you're almost in a position that you shouldn't be in necessarily, but you are, and you're playing great. And it's funny, it just added to it because the whole reason that came out is because Mac and the quarterback meeting guys were in a quarterback meeting. And that's when Mac had told me, he's like, you would have laughed at what Dayball said. Like, who is that number 36 guy? Looks like one of my guys in New England. And so that's where I think the term comes from. Is just like, it seems to be a minority in this time and era. If you look at it statistically, there's just less white guys at the wide receiver position.
No, sure, for sure. That's funny. Mac, you mentioned dream school, right? I mean, take us through the process of coming to Alabama. Like, why did you want to come to Alabama? And at what point did you realize, wow, this is about to happen? I'm going to go play for Nick Saban football team.
Yeah, I think ever since, I was a kid, I always like to think like teams have, essentially there's these movies, there's football movies, and you see Rudy, and it's like, all right, you have a guy who's grown up in an environment, who's dreamed of playing the school, and no better place for that storyline than the University of Alabama, because when you grow up in Alabama, you either you come out of the womb, and they're either holding an Auburn baby or an Alabama baby. That's what it is. You're coming out rooting on Alabama or rooting on Auburn, and I was bleeding crimson from birth, and so my whole family, and I was a fourth generation to go to the University of Alabama. So to me, it was one I grew up watching Alabama football. I would say I idolized Alabama football, kind of unhealthily probably as a kid, wearing the jerseys all the time, putting on the helmet, going to the games, and I always can vividly remember the feeling I had when going to those games and seeing those guys walk out of the tunnel. That I don't necessarily, even at a young age, I don't know what those guys are doing or what's going on, but the environment that they're creating, the environment that's built around this team and program, is something really, really special. And I want a piece of that. And so growing up, I always had that dream. I remember even at rec league, I started off as a lineman, and I was like, I don't want to play lineman. And then I moved to linebacker. And then it was like, okay, how do I get to where I want to go to next? And over time was like a fullback, then a running back. And then in high school, and the message that I want, I don't know if, hopefully there's some kids who can hear this out there, but the message I want to give out there is, in the journey, I was never the top guy. I was never the guy in seventh grade football and rec league football who's this scoring touchdowns left and right. I was never the guy who was a freak on the sheets, like going like crazy numbers and stats on the stat sheet. I was never that guy. I was always playing ninth grade. I was in ninth grade football. And in 10th grade, I was on JV. And then so all that to say, I worked extremely hard. And then I went to the Nick Saban football camps. My parents always try to get me to work hard. They always wanted everyone to work hard, and they wanted me to want it just as much as they wanted it for me. They wanted me to prove how much I wanted, and they wanted me to get it myself. And so, yes, they gave me a great environment, a great family that I grew up in, and parented me really well to give me the lessons. But when I was growing up, I was driving myself to camps. When I was able to do that, I was putting in off-season work. I had to figure out, hey, when I'm home, where am I going to train? What am I going to do? And how am I going to work hard? And then it became a reality. I went to the first year Nick Saban had Nick Saban football camp. I remember my grandfather, obviously it changed people's lives. No one knew what Nick Saban would do to the University of Alabama. But my grandfather was a huge Alabama fan, going to Alabama himself and having so much love for the program. And he went with me that first year, which was a really special memory. But being under Coach Saban, that first camp that he was there, I was a little kid, and I was like, this guy. I remember him speaking to the campers and the way he was talking stories. Those same stories I hear today. He told a Martin Luther King street sweeper story about, if you're going to be a street sweeper, or the quote Martin Luther King, you got to be the best street sweeper you can be. And I remember going, and he would talk about little things. If you're going to take out the trash for your parents, you got to be the best kid you can be for your parents. And let me tell you, that after that football camp, I was taking out the trash. I was doing my chores to the best of my ability. So I wanted to, I loved the University of Alabama, and I also, right there at that Nick Saban first football camp, I knew this guy had something special. And again, I didn't know exactly what it was. I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to have a piece of that and learn from that. And then continuing to go back in high school. And then I got a call in high school that I'd be offered a preferred walk-on opportunity at Alabama. And that's where it was like, okay, I'm one step closer. And then I show up to campus, and I remember, going through summer camp. It was tough, but I was like, I'm here. And I wouldn't even say I fully grasped. I was so in love, so happy, smiley, like just in awe and joy that first summer there for sure, that it didn't even really hit me then. It was when I first put on my pads and I realized, like, I'm here. And then that's where my mindset changed from, gosh, I want to be a part of this, to now I am a part of this. And I've got to work extremely hard because I think I can contribute here as well. So not as many details, but just a little bit of the backstory of why I really wanted to play there and what it meant to me. It was more than just a football program. It was more than, even being under Coach Nick Saban, I had a love for the University of Alabama and the state of Alabama in general. And it was a blessing. And I'm very, very, very grateful for my time to be a part of what I was.
Mac, I mean, you mentioned limited FaceTime with Nick Saban, right? Like in your time there, you're working with position coaches most of the time. But with Saban specifically, did you have any sort of relationship with him? Did you ever get any FaceTime while you were at Alabama? And what was that like?
Yeah. So coming in, it was always funny. There's always these jokes about recruiting process, and even as a walk-on, there's a sort of a recruiting process. I was invited to games, and I went to Alabama games as a recruit, and it was always funny to me because my shake Coach Saban's hand, he knew my name, and it was a lot part of I believe it was Jody Wright, who was director of football ops that first year, incredible at his job because I know he's the one feeding Coach Saban with this information on different guys. But so during that process, got to meet Coach Saban a couple of times. My family got to meet Coach Saban. And then it's always funny because after it's like it changes. It's different. So when you become a player, Coach Saban knew my name. I remember meeting with him one-on-one at one point and being scared and excuse my language, but scared shitless because you see this guy, he's your coach. It's an interesting dynamic because you're used to your coach being someone you talk to frequently. And now you're sitting here, and being a fan of the program for so long was a little bit different because now I'm seeing this guy that I always thought was, holy cow, Coach Saban, and now I'm playing for this guy. So yeah, when I met with him one-on-one, I can remember one time I went in there. I forget exactly what we were talking about, but I was just like, at the end of it, I was like, "Thank you, Coach," or something. And he was like, "Thank you," and I was like, "No, like thank you." And it got awkward because I was so nervous. I was like, "What is going on?" And then I just like walked out of his room. But it was awesome because he did know. I think I pride myself on believing that he knew everyone's names and he cares about us genuinely and really wants what's best for his players. But there was a method and a system to what he was doing. And looking back at it, during the time, sometimes I may have been like, "Gosh, I wish that I could have talked to Coach Saban more." Because some guys did. He did have good relationships with guys that I can remember that had really close relationships with him, like Tua, Jalen, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Reuben Foster. Those were guys that I remember him meeting with more frequently. But he was able to joke with us. He talked to us, and I did get to see him. Obviously every day at practice. Got my butt chewed out by him a couple of times for sure. One time I didn't have my knee pads down as low as they should have been for practice. But all to say, yeah, those are the experiences I had with him.
Well, I mean, you talk about, some of these teammates that you had, the relationships you had with those guys. I mean, you were there for the 2017 national title season. I mean, what do you remember about that season? You have this unbelievable quarterback room for starters, so much talent up and down the roster. Like, how special was that team?
That team was, in my opinion, one of the best teams in college football history. It was really cool. You look at guys, you look at Jalen, a guy who is during the season was the solidified starter, working his tail off, battling. You got, if I can remember, I'm trying not to get years mixed up because it's just the amount of guys. But Jalen takes us to that national title game. And you look around at that starting offense and the guys that played and contributed, there were some freshmen out there. And there's some young guys. And the way I would say that just, whether it was a guy who was older, the leadership, there's guys like that I can remember that season. I believe Ronnie Clark was still there, Josh McMillan, guys who weren't necessarily talked about all the time, but held a great leadership role because you have a lot of these younger guys coming in who were contributing. And that can be challenging at times for a lot of people because you're like, look, I've been here, I've been putting in the time, and now you've got this new guy coming in. But that team in particular, I remember the senior leadership, the older guys that maybe didn't necessarily play every single down, but worked their tails off. Levi Wallace, guys who were older that again, weren't in the spotlight necessarily all the time, but took ownership of being a leader regardless of what their position was on the field. And then leading to the national championship game, I still, there's a lot of times I look back and I'm like, holy, trying to keep it PC on here, but holy hell, I can't believe I was on that team. And at that moment when they decided to make that change to, bench Jalen and put Tua in and get to see that miraculous moment. And then I would say was talking to someone about it the other day because of Jalen, being in the Super Bowl, just the kind of guy Jalen Hurts is. And I think it was beautiful to see the way he handled the situation, not only publicly, but really what rubbed me the right way was the way he handled it internally with the team and with guys and with the players, how he took, pride in any quarterback would be upset. Let me tell you, I would have been upset. I personally would have been like, dang, like I got benched. I may have let my selfishness get go over the want for the team, but I never saw Jalen Hurts do that. It always seemed to be team first for him. And so I think that whole team to summarize it, was a team first kind of team. There was guys that were there for a long time that weren't getting as much playing time, but they were taking pride in their leadership roles and being a part of that program.
You were there for the 2 years Tua took over as the starter in 2018 and 2019. I mean, that receiver room, I mean, you're part of that group. I mean, that was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you've got Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, just to name a few. But I mean, those guys were just that. I mean, again, that's your position group. Like, what was that like working with that group every day and just witnessing that level of talent and productivity?
I mean, I look back at it and I'm like, wow, like I wanted the goal for me to play at the University of Alabama. One, you already hear how much I love the school and love the program. But another major point of why I wanted to go there was because I started to understand in older age, if you want to be the best at something, you don't only get coached by the best, you don't only put yourself in the best environment, but with the best players. And I had the opportunity to be with the best wide receiver crew, in my opinion, in college football, or at least through my 4-year tenure, the best wide receivers in general. That room in particular always stands out to me because a lot of guys, different schools, you may have a star. Any of those guys, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, you got John Mechie, you got Tyrell Shavers, who's now with the Buffalo Bills and has been doing some great things. You got Xavier Williams. You could go Slade Bolden. You could go on and on. There was a huge list. Every single one of those guys could have been a star at almost any other SEC school in the country. And so you think about that, they're all together. Not only that, for me, I was a competitor. I wanted to maximize any and everything I could to be better than those guys. So whether it was, hey, I need to run crisper routes, I need to get better on my breakdowns, I need to have better hands. The thing was that was really hard and frustrating, but also very fun. These guys were doing all those things too with their talent. They were outworking any other receivers in the whole entire country. So they had almost that walk-on mindset, that walk-on mentality that I had, whereas I was willing to do whatever it takes to equal the playing field. They were just doing that already and being at the skill level they were. So getting to compete with them and be with them and develop relationships with those guys and be around those guys was something I'll always cherish. And, the way we're able to joke in the wide receiver room, crack jokes with each other, but then go out there and practice and people push each other and call each other out when, hey, you're not running hard enough, you're not running fast enough. And they knew at every single moment their position or their starting role could be taken away because there's another guy right behind them that's just as talented, And so it was an awesome experience.
Incredible group to watch for so many years. And Mac, I've got one more for you before we do a little bit of a lightning round. I mean, your post-playing career has been pretty fascinating to watch, right? Because, I mean, you're out there on social media. You've got this presence across different platforms. You're at all these major sporting events. You're taking shots on goal with Giannis Antetokounmpo playing goalkeeper. I mean, you're featured on Good Morning America at one point. Like, what has life been like for you since leaving football behind?
Well, on the outside, like overall, I'm extremely grateful. I'm very blessed and grateful and appreciative to God for giving me the opportunities He has. And sometimes I think I take it for granted. Internally, it wasn't always as fun. It was very hard. Finishing up football, that was my passion. At some points, that became my purpose, which I think is a thing for some guys, especially being at a program like Alabama. I think the goal is to realize what you're doing is important, but also realize the bigger vision for yourself and realize that, hey, this is a part of my journey and building who I am. All to say, after ball ended, it was kind of depressing. It was very tough. And so for me, I was like, how do I continue to have fun opportunities? How do I find purpose in other things? And I went extremely hard into that. I like to call myself like the side quest king. And so I have, work stuff that I put under the work or entrepreneurship type bubble, marketing and media consulting. So I've gotten to do a bunch of that with some really cool business and gotten to learn a bunch and be a part of some awesome teams. And on the other side of things, yeah, it has been incredible. Like you mentioned, I would have never thought I would have kicked a soccer goal against Giannis Antetokounmpo. And not only that, what I think I would have kicked it high on a guy who's 6'9", probably not the smartest decision, but it is what it is. And it was fun and it was a great experience. So I've been very grateful and getting to do those cool experiences. And also it's fun because my path has been able to cross with a bunch of guys that I've played with at Alabama, and getting to see them in different lights and different environments than just the playing field, but outside in the real world is really fun and maintaining those relationships. So really blessed for what I've gotten to do, and hope to continue to do some fun stuff.
It's been fun to watch. All right, Mac, we're going to go through a lightning round real quick before you go. Some quick hitter questions. This is going to be a piece of cake for you as somebody who's been a part of SEC football in his lifetime, and really, truly during one of the great runs. You were there, man. You were in the room.
Look,
you truly
I was
were.
there. I was locked in. I was focused. I was in the present. So I'm curious what you're going to ask me, but I might miss every single one of these. I don't know if Matt remembers back in the day I did some trivia thing, and I don't think I got it.
This isn't trivia. This is just what do you think from your experience, okay? All right, so for instance, all right, number one, what SEC team do you hate the most?
Auburn.
Easy,
I would say, just more because of me growing up as an Alabama fan, and that's like kind of what it was, life was before football. I would say moving on now, it's not as easy. I would say Auburn is up there, and then you got Tennessee, LSU.
Yeah, truly. All right, favorite Alabama teammate. Sorry to make you choose, but if you had to pick one, who's your favorite Alabama teammate?
This is so tough. This is really, really tough. I mean, I would answer this, but I've got so many that are like, I hate to be that guy. I can't answer that one. I have way too many that I absolutely love.
All right, you got a future in politics, Mac. Toughest teammate to go against at practice?
Either Tony Brown or Pat Surtain.
Tony Brown. You got to have a Tony Brown story. A quick Tony Brown story. Give us one.
Tony Brown's awesome. I remember one time I still have a great relationship with Tony. And there was one time where, I was third, fourth string guy, whatever. We're on a different field this was fall camp. And Tony Brown had done something, messed up a read or done something bad on the ones field. And my God, please, like, why? Why did I still ask? I'm like, Tony, why did I have to have this day? Tony Brown is one of the most athletic people I've ever played with. And hardest to go against DB, physical, fast. He's there. He's literally a mirror. Anywhere I go, he was going. And so he gets sent down from the ones field is like punishment or whatever to the threes, fours. And I'm down there, and I've been having a great summer camp, fall camp, just doing great, loving it. This all changes. Tony Brown walks in the indoor. He's with us on the threes and fours field. And this ain't a regular Tony Brown. This is a pissed off Tony Brown. And so going through that day against Tony Brown was hysterical because he was in a different mindset and treating it like it was the gosh dang Super Bowl every play, which I treated it like that too. But this is a guy whose athletic ability far surpasses mine. And so that was one time. That was one memory with Tony that was hysterical. But being around him, he's just a very lighthearted, fun guy. And it's crazy because on the field, a lot of these guys can flip a switch. And he's one of those guys, on the field. He's extremely hardworking. He's a dog out there. He will stop anyone. Very hard to compete against. But then off the field, he's very creative. He's awesome. Tony and I still talk to this day. I've been fortunate enough to be up in Cleveland for some things and see him. He's with the Browns now. And so it's been awesome getting to see him outside of ball and really develop that relationship with him. But him and Pat Surtain, definitely probably the top two.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pat Surtain seems like he'd be pretty tough at practice. Sorry, great answer. We love Tony Brown. Love that guy. Favorite game you played or favorite game to watch, play, whatever, while you were at Alabama?
Whew. I've got one answer. It's not a good answer because we didn't win the game, but the atmosphere was incredible. So I'm going to hold that one out. I would say freshman year, we're playing Washington in a playoff game. And family is one of the most important things to me. And we won the game and getting to, after the game, my brother was a capstone man. So one of the ambassadors for the school, and they had awarded the capstone group. Their seniors got to go sit front row seats, and they wore red crimson suits. And so seeing my brother, someone I've grown up with, who I competed with, who I'd give credit to for some of the player I was because he was hard on me growing up and competing with me. But seeing him after being at that game and that my first playoff game, being with that Alabama team, the whole playoff experience was incredibly well done and getting to see just great environment. But then also going up and getting to see my brother and into that game with getting to give him a hug and jump up in the stands to see his friends. That one. And then also easy answer is just the championship game that Tua came in and threw, the winning touchdown pass. Just because that was a moment in history. I think that during the time I didn't really realize that I was in a sprinter stance ready to go. We missed the field goal. I had to get out of that sprinter stance. Then I'm thinking, what's going on? What's happening? This game feels like a game we might not win. There's a part of me that thinks, the whole season we've been kicking A. I'm like, we're going to win this. And that one, it's like, we might not win it. And then at the end of it, seeing the guys come in and not give up and have that mentality to keep going, even when it looks slim, and to win. And I remember just running across that sideline like a goddamn world-class sprinter. I probably wasn't going that fast, but I remember like holding my fist up, going behind Coach Saban. But being a part of that was one of the best times. And then the first game that I ever got in my sophomore year was another one that I remember. I didn't even have my helmet on when I got my name called because I didn't think I was going in. And I told my parents and family not even to show up to that game because I didn't think I was getting in either. It was senior day, and got in. And so that was one experience that I think I'll never forget. And then A-Day game, I guess going into my junior year, wasn't officially like a game, like a game against any other team, but being able to get my chance, get my shot. I got to start in that A-Day game and felt comfortable, felt calm under pressure, felt like I've been waiting for this moment and ready for it my whole entire life. And so finally getting the chance to really, really, truly compete and feel like I was helping my team out on the field was a great experience as well.
Awesome answers. 3 more for you, Mac. Favorite place to eat in Tuscaloosa when you're in school?
Ooh. Yeah, stuff. I would say I love Chuck's. But you know what's going to do it is probably Heat Pizza Bar.
Oh, wow.
We started a tradition actually with a couple of guys. It was me, Giles Amos, Pierce Quick, and actually a guy who wasn't even a football player, Jake Ruttenberg. All went out to Heat Pizza Thursday nights, and that would be our Thursday night spot before Friday walkthrough. And so going there, it was great. And I love Heat Pizza, just the environment, great food. But it was more about the fact of who I was going with is why I loved it, and the tradition that we started. And guys actually years after had still done that. I don't know if they're still doing it anymore, but I think like 2 or 3 years after I left, guys were still going Thursday nights, and it got up to a group of like 14. So that was definitely one of my favorite places as well.
We got love for Heat Pizza Bar for sure. We had a Tuscaloosa restaurant draft on this show several months back, and somebody picked Heat Pizza Bar. So good pick there, Mac. All right, couple more. If you didn't go to Alabama, where would you have gone?
Whew. If I didn't go to Alabama, where would I have gone? I guess anywhere that I felt was going to give me one answer was if I could have gotten into Princeton. I went and visited Princeton. I really wanted to go to an Ivy League, honestly, because one of my brothers, who's a genius, couldn't get in. I got waitlisted at Harvard, and I was like, okay, I can, this will be my chance to beat him out in the academic area because I didn't have the grades, but maybe football could help me get in. So maybe an Ivy League would have been really cool. Or just a school that I knew coming in was going to give me a great opportunity to compete and play ball. But the biggest thing to me was I always tell people when you're looking at a school to go to, not to necessarily look somewhere like somewhere where you're going to play and they're going to have a system in place is extremely important, but fall in love with the school as well, because you don't know what could happen in football. That's for the best players and for the worst players. It's guys you could get injured, and I've seen guys not be happy. And so, look, I have to redo my answer. No, Alabama is the only place I would have gone.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, that's the point of the question. We're asking diehard Alabama guys who played at Alabama where else they might have gone, but we get it. All right, last one. Mac, when does Alabama win another championship?
You know what? I can't tell you when. I can tell you that I want it to be soon. I don't know the exact date. I really hope that in these next couple of years, the next 2 to 5 years, and I think that we've got a good shot. It's hard to tell now because there's obviously the new coaching staff. We've got a new head coach. A guy comes in, and you look at Coach Saban's career as well. It didn't happen off rip. It didn't happen right away. It did happen very quickly, but not right away. And so I hope in these next couple of years. I wish I could tell you exactly when, but I'm just not good enough at the knowledge to know that.
No worries. All right, thanks to Mac Hereford. Mac, you crushed it, man. Really appreciate it. Former Alabama wide receiver. You can see him everywhere on social media, Mac_Hereford. Mac, so cool of you to make some time. We really appreciate it. All sorts of awesome stories. People need to check you out. Follow him on social media, folks. Mac, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for having me on. Roll Tide, and real appreciative.